This is a long diatribe. I apologize, but it is kind of a complicated situation given the fact that there's huge two sides of this thing. So Krafton is delaying Subnautica 2 ahead of a $250 million payout that was promised to the developers based upon performance, right? So the story fundamentally is that Krafton is postponing Subnautica 2 to 2026 for a lot of reasons. But one is that the co-founders, Charlie Cleveland and Max McGuire, along with the CEO, Ted Gill, were recently removed and replaced by Steve Papoutsis of Striking Distance Studios. So the delay basically came right before they're potentially going to be able to earn a $250 million earnout in 2025. And so the allegations is that the postponement is a strategic move to basically eliminate the ability for them to pay this out. But Krafton is publicly claiming that the game simply isn't ready and needs more polish. And then Unknown Worlds' ousted leadership is obviously insisting the game was ready and the staff had expected substantial bonuses. I guess to start this thing off, we have to understand the background here. So Krafton acquired Unknown Worlds after the success of the original Subnautica in 2021 for $500 million. Since then, they've only had one release, which was Moonbreaker, which was an absolute disaster of epic proportions. Like it didn't do anything, right? So to be clear, similar to what they did with Zynga, they put an impairment charge, a loss of $190 million in 2023 related to this acquisition. So clearly this acquisition has not gone well for them to date by any measure that I can see, right? But the absolutely critical part of this is the release of the sequel to their huge hit of Subnautica. And by the way, Subnautica was an absolutely amazing game, a game before its time, built by a small team. It took the world by storm, and it is a very, very fun and great game. All right. So here's Krafton's argument. Krafton is saying they're delaying the game for quality. The content was missing in the game. The leadership was not managing this process, and they had other commitments and other things that they were doing. And they are claiming that they were basing it on project status, not the $250 million earnout for the executives. And Krafton is basically suggesting that they want to make sure that this game is ready and that they get a long-term success, not just like a one-shot like revenue bump in the year. Unknown Worlds is basically saying the game was ready and argues that it was ready for early access, that they are accusing Krafton of basically delaying the game to avoid this $250 million payout. There's a breach of trust, and they were unjustly dismissed by the company, and now they are filing an legal action against the company.
That is sealed. Yes.
What?
The lawsuit is sealed, which was interesting.
Oh, really? Oh, because there's a lot of information thrown around about this thing. That's why it's so complicated, because it's just
yeah. I read up on it like before, like the latest this morning, and that was like, I'm like, that's kind of fascinating that you all are complaining, but the lawsuit is sealed. Anyway, continue on.
So, okay. So here's my take on this, right? Fundamentally, right? And this is tough because obviously we don't know all the information, but like there's two key questions that doesn't seem to be asked by anybody. I don't know why, but one question was asked. The second question was not asked. But the first question is the game ready for release, right? Like that's actually a fundamental question. Is it ready for release? And by these leaked quote unquote documents that suggested what they anticipated for the early access launch to what they are planning on releasing for the early access launch, it is really relatively clear, if you believe these documents, that the title was not ready, right? The title was not content complete to release. And I played this game enough to know that what they were releasing was not enough to keep players engaged and to create a service that would generate significant amounts of revenue for them going forward, right? It's just 50% of the game was not ready for release based upon what they originally assumed that they would do. So I don't know. They seem to be off target, right?
Yeah. These slides have been verified by Krafton that they are real from the milestone meeting. That's the latest.
Right.
So these are legit slides that we're looking at.
I know, but it's so gross that these were leaked. Clearly they were leaked for a reason, right?
Yeah.
They were anyway. So, but I think the more important thing here that no one seems to be asking, and I did read it on a Slack channel thing, but like, given the performance of Moonbreaker, which would also be included in this calculation, like, is there any way they would have gotten to the earnout bonus, right? Like, if they're going to get a $250 million earnout bonus, they have to make more money than $250 million, right? And Moonbreaker made nothing, right? So can you tell me for certainty that like in the back half of this month, like the last 3 months of this year, that they would have been able to recoup the $250 million and above that in order to earn it?
That's not how earnout works. Like they might have had different triggers for the earnout. It could be production related. It could be review related. It's not necessarily how much they generate. Usually it's earnout is some kind of a milestones that you achieve. And then out of what you generate, you get a percentage. So above of 250, they would have gotten percentage from sales. I think like that's typically I've seen.
Right. But everyone keeps throwing this $250 million number out here. Like they were going to get a fucking check.
Like it's guaranteed.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's how it works. Like the way I understand and the way I've seen earnouts being structured. So they already got the 500. So the founders, I think, got 90% of 500 or something like that. And then the rest was left of 250 of the total earnout. And there were milestones, like one must have been the release of this game. And then there's no.
Okay. First of all, that is dumb, right? Yeah. Like there is no way that anybody would ever structure a deal in which it's just based upon release. Yeah. It's based upon performance.
No.
Like, no.
I've never seen an earnout structure in my life.
Are you being sarcastic?
Yes.
Oh.
I've never seen one, never signed one, never worked at a big publisher, and they would for sure not pay for reaching certain milestones.
But look, if you're a financially motivated company, a publicly traded company, you're not giving a $250 million check for releasing a game. You're getting it for performance on revenue. Like that, there's no way. That doesn't even make sense.
Okay, so I'm not going to comment more, but let's say I have seen different, and you're coming from the right perspective of how earnout structures should be. But the way I'm telling you is oftentimes there are other metrics that are tied to the earnout. And then on top of that, there's usually a revenue share that comes from. So that component is like, these are crazy contracts. We're talking about 2021 contract. It is absolutely ludicrous. But I would assume that the release of this game would have triggered a big portion of the earnout.
Yeah, it just seems like half of their purchase price at 250 seems like a lot. And then the way that the 250 allocation works, 90% went to the 3 founders. And then the last 10% goes to the company, to the employees. The argument is that the 3 founders said that they were planning on distributing some of their earnout money to the team, but contractually that's not listed in anything that we've read. So that's a little bit of the disagreement as well, that Krafton is saying that the founders didn't intend to distribute that. Whether that was going to happen or not and how that was going to happen, I think we don't know.
Just saying, Chris, it could be much crazier than you think.
I see here the likely scenario is that the team was just not on track, right, to hit the earnout, right? And Moonbreaker, like literally was like a big part of the calculus here, and it was a disaster. It was just an absolute bomb. I don't think it generated more than like $3 or $4 million, right? So again, if you're talking about a $250 million earnout and they want to be whole and cash flow positive on this thing, they have to hit significant amounts of revenue on this game. And frankly, Subnautica, despite its success, did not do that much revenue. Like over its life, it certainly did, but certainly not initially. So anyway, it doesn't seem very likely that they were on track to earn the earnout. So what I think is that Krafton is delayed Subnautica so that they would be able to recoup as much money as possible from this acquisition that's gone sideways, right? And management said, no fucking way, we want a shot at our earnout, or maybe you're right, maybe part of the earnout at least. But realistically, I mean, this wasn't likely going to happen. And again, based upon performance to date, like it didn't make sense for Krafton to release something now. But it makes much more sense to release it later when it was actually ready for prime time and it could generate significant amounts of revenue and deliver on the promise of the game itself, for that matter, right? And so like the cynical part of me basically says that basically Krafton's claim that management kind of checked out and was working on other projects. It wasn't really focused on this game development. And this is why it was delayed and why they didn't have any of the content that they promised, et cetera, that they weren't being leaders in the company. My cynical side is basically saying, well, look, if they didn't believe they were going to hit this earnout, then maybe they did, as creative people, focus on other things, right? But the reality is, I don't think they would have abandoned their child, right, of this game. I think they would want to get this thing done in an effective way. So I think that's a little bit like cynical to think that they would have done that and abandoned their baby type thing. On the flip side, like releasing a game like Subnautica with the level of content that they were suggesting just doesn't make sense, like logically, right? Because the part of the engagement is the amount of, the biomes and all the content that you need to get through. Like the Subnautica fans of this game would get through this content in like less than like 24 hours. It's like that doesn't work for a game like this. So I didn't know that they were actually closed the lawsuit, but I I imagine we'll get more and more details as they go through discovery. But if they're trying to keep it on the hush hush, which I'm a little bit shocked given how much information was thrown out there. Anyway, that's all I got.
Yeah, really good breakdown. Thank you, Eric. From my point, just three things. Like I think you're absolutely correct. I think, even based on the reports, it's quite typical for these type of founders to check out. And I think they were doing other projects. I think they earned 500 million already and took 90% of that to the founders. So each of them was doing quite well. Probably traveling between Vegas and Honolulu on the regular. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. But, any of us could imagine how their life would change if you go from grinding on this development studio to having 70 million in your bank account. There was an interesting off-topic comment on LinkedIn from a person who used to work at Garena Corp Dev. I couldn't find it. I tried to look at it, but he basically commented that, I looked at this case and some sort of like, we passed because of the founders or something like that. I'm paraphrasing, but I remember seeing that comment on, maybe it was LinkedIn was full of this news, but I remember seeing that. It was really open comment on it, kind of like signing that there is an issue with the founders, and that's why Garena passed on it. And I do believe that Krafton did pull the plug to avoid the earnouts. And I think that the earnouts were milestone based in this case. And that's why they pulled the plug. If they weren't, if it was about generating 250 mil, then I think there wouldn't be any kind of a rush of pulling the plug, because this game that is not ready clearly wouldn't make that money. And yes, there would be bad PR, just like with the Mind's Eye type of a thing, but that would have just, killed the studio. So in this case, if they knew that they would have to pay a significant amount, then they saved $250 million by essentially escalating this case into a lawsuit.
I'm not going to let you go on that one. That doesn't make any sense. Like,
the milestone-based earnouts?
These are smart people that know how to negotiate terms. They're not giving away money on a release. That's just doesn't even make sense.
I'm not going to comment on that. What we could do is we could talk to the smart folks at Areem who deal with sales and earnouts a lot, or any of the VCs who see earnout sheets, and they can comment if they have seen, if you're a VC or an investment banker, and you have seen earnouts where it's tied to release and production milestones, holla at us DM. We will not tell who it is. We will just say you're from a reputable company. Or if we're wrong on this, then also DM us. So
I'm not suggesting that there aren't payouts based upon milestones. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that a $250 million payout wholly is not based upon milestones.
Yes.
It is based
half
upon
of their purchase price. Yeah. I mean, that seems
no
extreme.
way.
So in this case, it could be something like 50 mil is unlocked when they pass pre-production. 50 mil is passed when they pass production.
Sure.
And then there could be 100 mil when they reach. But there are elements that are tied to actually launching a game. In some companies that have live operations, it could be passing the test launch phases. So I've seen those with different companies.
I think we agree.
But they are significant. They're like 30% of the earnout when you pass this milestone.
All right. So the one thing I wanted to mention is I have never seen a statement like this from a big company on their website going into this dirty laundry. I was absolutely shocked. Listen, I kind of applaud it. I applaud the transparency, but holy shit, was it get your popcorn out moment. The second thing I wanted to get Phil's perspective on really quick is early access means a lot more now than it did in 2021. When you early access a game, it is almost like a launch. And so do you think, Phil, that had anything to do with this?
I think people just want more money for Inzoi development. Krafton.
Jesus Christ. Yeah. Thank you for answering my question.
What a troll.
I actually did forget to mention that. I think they're feeling a bit burned too, right? Inzoi was a disaster. Callisto Protocol was an absolute train wreck.
PUBG New State. How about that?
PUBG is fucking delivering, by the way. We haven't covered that. PUBG's doing a ton of crazy, awesome shit right now.
Tencent PUBG or PC PUBG?
The PC PUBG.
No, that's Jacob. Philip, that has nothing to do with this. This is all about.
Sure, yeah,
did you just mix up your son's name with Phil?
Yeah, I do that all the time.
Anyway, we should call Phil.
We're having
son.
All these deals that they signed since the success of PUBG, and just have not worked out, right? Particularly for the Western developers, they're having their NetEase moment where they're just basically pulling back on all things, right? And so, Callisto Protocol was a train wreck of epic proportions in terms of money spent and dollars earned. And so I think this is like actually part of that as well. I'm sure management's just not happy with these investments. So.